Okay, today we're talking about, well, we're going to finish talking about all the childhood problems that people have. We're going to talk about tic disorders. Tic disorders, common, not uncommon, relatively common actually. There's a lot of different, well, there's 4 different types of tics. Simple motor tics, blinking and grimacing. I'm going to show you one of those in just a minute. The complex motor tics, the hand gestures and twirling, simple verbal tics, clearing the throat or grunting. And I've talked to another class about it. An individual that he was a colonel in the United States Air Force. He was also a veterinarian. If he got nervous, his verbal tics would start. He would hitch his pants up with his forearms, and then he would he'd suck in kind of like Donald Trump does. I had another friend. He wasn't my friend. This guy was my friend. That guy was actually my friend. At least he said he was. He would suck in when he talked. And the problem is, when I talk to people like that, I start doing what they're doing. So he'd do those kinds of things. And he'd do a couple of them. It was really kind of interesting. So when I talked to him, I would do the same thing. I was downstairs on the radio the other day in LA. What does she do at the end? She goes, at the end of every sentence. Not Canadian, but she just goes, and it's so that she can think of what she's going to say. And I started doing the same thing. I know. So this is it's addictive. So you have to be careful not to get into any trouble. Complex verbal tics, words or phrases that the individual uses. It may include coprolalia. Anything that is copro. Copro is Latin for feces. Okay, so coprophytes are pieces of petrified feces, and they found some actually. They were like 30,000 years old, up in Washington State. Coprolites. Anything that's copro has to do with feces. Anyway, coprolalia is lalia just means talk, so this has to do with poopy talk.
So blinking is a tic?
Blinking's a tic. Well, it can be a tic if you blink at select times. You can't control yourself. You got one of these things going.
Is it caused by stress too?
Can be caused by stress. It gets worse with stress. Can also get worse with medication, as we're going to talk about in just a second. The individuals that when we talk about Tourette Syndrome, people think that they swear a lot, and they can't control themselves. Well, that's not all of Tourette Syndrome. It's just coprolalia, is individuals that they have verbal obscenities or unacceptable verbalizations. I don't know. I'm not going to use any of these things right off the top of my head. This guy's got a tic, as you can see. DSM-5 includes 4 disorders involving either verbal tics, motor tics, or a combination of the 2. Tourette's disorder is 1, persistent chronic motor tic disorder is another, and persistent chronic vocal tic is another. This is obviously a persistent chronic motor tic. And provisional tic disorder. And usually when they are stressed, they're under stress, their tic gets worse. It gets more obvious. With the veterinarian I was telling you about before, he was fine as long as he was sitting down. It was when he was standing up in front of a group that he would get all nervous and he'd start doing his tic. Kind of interesting because for some reason I intimidated him. I'm a very intimidating person, as you can tell. And anytime he was around me, I'm not exactly sure this thing's shooting at the board. It's probably shooting over the other direction. That's okay. There we go. Okay. You guys want to be in the movie? Okay. No? All right. Anyway, I intimidated him. So anytime I was talking to him, all of a sudden he'd start hitching up his pants and sucking in real loud. It's kind of interesting. My wife didn't intimidate him, and she worked for it, but she didn't intimidate him. But for some reason, I did. I'm not exactly sure what that's all about. Tourette's disorder, both multiple motor and vocal tics, must be have persisted for at least a year. Symptoms must have begun before the age of 18, and normally these tics will develop long before that, usually around age 4 or 5. We start seeing these tics. Puberty sometimes can kick people into a tic. Usually begin, well, that's what I just said. Around age 6, can wax and wane in the course and tends to diminish in severity as people age. The tics, which happen many times each day, cannot be attributable to general medical conditions or substance abuse. And as I said, we do see this with substance abuse sometimes. In less than 10% of the person's coprolalia occurs. So the probability of running into somebody who just starts swearing like a sailor is fairly remote. It doesn't really happen all that often. We do use it as excuses when people lose their tempers and whatnot. There you go. She's got one. She's got a tic going. There we go. There you go. Okay. Persons with Tourette's disorder often feel discomfort, shame, or social embarrassment over their condition. Impairment in functioning is not among the diagnostic criteria for this condition. About 1/2 of the people with Tourette's disorder also have ADHD, and this is a problem. And the problem is that if you have ADHD and you're on medication, if you take the medication, it makes the Tourette syndrome worse. And this is kind of a problem if you think about it. So they can't take their medication. Oh, she's going like this and her head over to the one side. Fascinating. The diagnosis is given to men between 2 and 3 times, or 2 and 5 times more often than women. It is rare. It's a relatively rare condition. An upper prevalence estimate is about 8 school children per 1,000. So the probability of having one of these individuals, an individual with a tic disorder in school, is relatively remote. Maybe you run into somebody who has a tic disorder. You can see all of the interesting things that these people do. Kind of fascinating. There appears to be a substantial genetic component to the disorder. Recent randomized controlled trial found behavior therapy to be as effective as antipsychotic medications for treating Tourette disorder in children. I know that sounds really strange. All they have is a tic disorder, and here we're giving them antipsychotic medications. Be prepared, you're going to see more of this in the future, unfortunately. Because if we can't control something, we give them stronger and stronger medications.
Could you do convulsions?
I'm sorry?
Convulse.
Go into convulsions because of the
No. They take things like that. That would.
Oh, anticonvulsants.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, anticonvulsants like dilantin and carbamazepine.
So they take that too, or that not work?
It doesn't work.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it does work with bipolar disorder, and we discovered it, and we really don't understand why it works. So, no, it doesn't work, unfortunately. Anticonvulsants, that would be a good idea, though. It looks like something that may respond to SSRIs, but it doesn't respond to SSRIs. I mean, it's like OCD. It's just like OCD, but it doesn't work. SSRIs don't work. Persistent motor vocal tic disorder involves either multiple vocal or motor tics, but not both of them at the same time. Persistent motor vocal tic disorder differs from Tourette's disorder, which requires the presence of both at the same time. So the individual that I was talking about, the veterinarian who had the tic actually had Tourette syndrome because he hitched up his pants and he had that sucking in sound that he would make. Really kind of interesting. It was kind of strange because he didn't realize he was doing it. And so I'd be standing there talking to him about something, and he'd be doing this like every minute. He's hitching up his pants and sucking in when he's trying to say something. It would, if he was trying to say a word, he would just skip that word. So if this happened in a meeting, he would skip whatever word was coming up when he did it, as confusing as that is. So it took the place of the word that he wasn't saying. Yeah. Which made it kind of confusing to go to meetings with him. Eventually he cured it. He didn't really cure it, but they cured it at the meetings because he would sit down and give his presentations instead of standing up and giving his presentations. And that cured it because he didn't do it when he sat down. Like Tourette's disorder, symptoms must persist for a year and have an onset before the age of 18. 4 DSM-5 classifications of communication disorder, language disorder, speech sound disorder, child onset fluency disorder, usually stuttering, social pragmatic communication disorder. All the communication disorders occur more commonly among males. These disorders also appear to aggregate within families, although the specific genetic, neurological, environmental causes are not known. Language disorder involves language use and acquisition that is substantially below the level expected, shown by limited vocabulary, word recall difficulty, shortened or overly simplistic sentences. Geez, I did this in my meeting today. I couldn't think of the word. Artifact was the word I was trying to think of, Jeff, and I couldn't think of it. Shortened or overly simplistic sentences and errors in verb tense, or a deficiency of understandable discourse. Receptive communication may also be affected, involving difficulties understanding word sentences or particular types of word phrases, such as if-then statements. And there are individuals that have a difficult time understanding what you're saying. Just a hint, if you ever take a class from Christopher Jones, he speaks a lot faster than I do. Just a hint. So if you try to take notes, he talks so fast. He's from Houston, and he talks really fast with a Texas accent.
Give us an example.
Yes.
Wow, a Texas accent. I don't know, Jeff, give us an example of a Texas accent. Come on, Jeff, be a sport.
Not on command. It's
It's kind of a southern accent, but it's a little bit softer. It's a lot softer, actually, than the southern accent. Expression of written, they leave the ends off of words sometimes, which is kind of fascinating. The expression of written language, spoken language, and sign language can be impaired. Course is variable, although some difficulties tend to persist into adulthood. Those with receptive language deficits appear to have a poor prognosis than individuals with other problems. Speech sound disorder is an articulation disorder in which persons fail to use the speech sounds that are normal for their developmental level. And this is one of the problems. This is one of the reasons that when the doctor sees the child, he'll ask them questions, trying to get them to articulate to him anything, so that he can determine whether they have one of these problems. Difficulties may occur in knowledge of the correct phonological sounds or in the motor coordination required for speaking. Lisping, of course, is the problem. There is a language where everybody lisps because it's part of the language. And that's Castilian Spanish. That's the Spanish that they speak over in Spain. People in South America don't have a lisp. People in Mexico certainly don't have a lisp. But people in Puerto Rico do have a lisp. They speak with a lisp.
Is speech disorder hereditary?
It can be, yes. Not in Spain, of course. The reason the Spanish speak with a lisp, and this is fascinating, is because once upon a time there was a king who had a lisp. And in order to not embarrass the king, they started speaking their Spanish with a lisp. And of course, then that became part of the court. So if you were an important person in the government, then you spoke with a lisp because the king did that once upon a time. So now, if you're part of the government, so everybody started doing it in Spain. The people that came over here, of course, the Spaniards that came over here, decided that they would stop doing that. And of course, they were also mating, that's the right word. They were reproducing with individuals, indigenous people here, and of course they thought it was stupid because there was really no reason for it. So I know. So if you speak South American Spanish, you will not speak with a lisp. But if you speak Castilian Spanish, I had two students when I was at Ashford. One of them was from Mexico, and the other was from, her mother was from Spain. So they both spoke Spanish, and they'd speak Spanish to each other, and one of them would make fun of the other one for lisping, of course. It was funny to listen to those two people argue. It was just fascinating. Of course, I was the only one that understood the joke because I don't remember why. Oh, I was in Spain once upon a time. Went to Spain for a softball tournament when I was in the service. And I spoke to the people there, and they all spoke with a lisp. And they made fun of people that didn't speak with a lisp, which is kind of interesting. Not that interesting, I guess. Speech therapy is helpful, and articulation tends to improve over time. Speaking with a lisp or not speaking with a lisp is kind of like Southern English, where people speak with a really slow and talk and draw out their vowels. Or those crazy Fargoians who overpronounce the R's, eh? And try to talk like them Canadians, eh? Anyway, so lisping is just the same difference. Speech therapy is helpful, and articulation tends to improve over time. If language disorder is also present, the prognosis is less optimistic, of course, and that isn't a problem. Stuttering, of course, is a disturbance in speech fluency, and this is an answer to a question on the quiz. It's speech fluency. It's the fact that your speech is not fluid. Typically characterized by speech blocks, repetitions of words or syllables, and prolongations of speech sounds. Difficulties increase under conditions of stress or anxiety, of course, as with all of these problems. They increase with stress and anxiety. Approximately 1% of children are persistent stutterers, and another 4 to 5% have transitory stuttering when young, but outgrow it in time. So usually you do outgrow these problems. As soon as you go through puberty, your brain gets restructured with puberty. There's pruning that takes place. And usually this is pruned out of the individual's brain.
Is it hereditary?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to see that at the bottom of the slide. Childhood onset fluency disorder almost always starts before the age of 8. We can be coded for adult onset. Usually the onset is gradual for the adult. And usually it has something to do with somebody he's talking to, that individual is talking to. More males than females, as we, for one reason or another, I'm not exactly sure. Okay. Anyway, so more males than females. If I am talking to somebody and somebody has an interesting accent, I will start using their accent. I don't know why. It's the way I get along with people, I guess. But I will start stuttering. And like I said, when I was talking to LA on the radio, I started using the same endings to sentences that she did, which is not that you could assume that somebody's making fun of you, but I can't help myself. So up in Montana, when I was talking, I overpronounced my O's up there, eh? Because everybody, they kind of talk like Canadians, so they overpronounce the O's. Not you guys. Yes, you do. You do too.
I say bag, and like my students will say, "What is bag?" You know, and I'll say, "Get me a trash bag." And they'll be like, and or I'll say, "Where's the flag?" Or I can't say it right. I just can't. But my grandson, his name is Cassie, and they're like, "Well, how come you can say that, but you can't say bag?" So my dad, he'll say it right, but me and all my sisters, we always say egg. And so I'm trying to learn the Navajo language. And
did everybody hear her
hard.
accent? Did everybody hear her accent?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You probably don't even realize that you
do I have an
sound.
accent?
Oh my goodness, yes, you do have an
Yeah,
accent.
you do.
I do?
I love it. It's like being back home. So just talk as much as you want. I don't In families in which the father has a history of stuttering, 10% of the daughters and 20% of the sons also stutter. So there is a genetic aspect to it. Or maybe they're just picking it up from talking to the old man, Sometimes we do speak like the people around us. I was working in Oklahoma, and I worked for a lady that had the worst southern accent you could possibly imagine. So I was thinking, my God, her parents must be rednecks. I mean, from hell, rednecks from hell, because this lady had the worst accent. Oh, it was terrible. So her dad came in, and turns out he's from New Hampshire, so he didn't have an accent at all. And then her mother came in, and she's from Oklahoma, and I'm thinking, she must be the worst. Have the worst accent in the world. Lady's an English teacher, didn't have any accent whatsoever. This lady had picked up her accent from talking to the people from talking to her friends and talking to her high school class. She had lost her New Hampshire accent, and she lost her father or mother's accent, which was not at all. But it's really kind of fascinating. My wife is from Georgia, and they lived in Alabama for an extended length of time, and then they moved to Tucson. They were in the father was in the Air Force, and they moved to Davis-Monthan. And when they were at Davis-Monthan, they made so much fun of them for talking like somebody from the South that all three of them lost their accent completely. They lost it completely. And I'll tell you what, butter can melt in that lady's mouth when she's talking like that, but she lost it completely. And the only time it comes back is if she's talking to somebody from Georgia or Alabama. All of a sudden, she starts yelling everything, which drives me crazy, of course.
My daughter learned to read in Florida,
Uh-huh.
with a Floridian accent, and when she got home, she spoke like that for a good 3 years. And then people are starting to make fun of her for it. And people at school, Navajo teachers were telling her to pronounce things right.
Oh, okay.
And she was pronouncing it right, but that got her frustrated, so she stopped.
She was pronouncing it right in Florida.
That's why, like, for me, I can't say you all. I have to say y'all.
Yeah. Of course. I had an Australian student last year, and I would tease her because she speaks like an Australian. You know how Australians talk. And I would tell her, because sometimes I couldn't understand what she was saying. Her accent was so thick. So I told her she had to speak like an American in order for me to understand. And
Did that go well?
yeah, it went okay. It went fine. She knew I wasn't picking on her. It's just like I pick on you, Jeff, okay? She was okay.
You know, if you ever want to hear Sarah say something funny,
Uh-oh.
tell her to do a Canadian accent with an Australian accent.
Oh, no.
She can do it, and it is hilarious. It is funny.
Okay, next time I see.
No. She says A, like the way Navajo would say A, but not the way Canadians say it.
She said she grew out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I tried to make fun of her when I first got here. It didn't work at all. No, it didn't work. I don't do it anymore. Okay? And I still have a job for next year, so that's still good. It was close. Half or more of the individuals who begin to stutter will recover with little or no professional help. The reality is you grow out of this stuff. According to the DSM-5, 65% to 85% of stutterers recover from the disfluency. Now, it's really kind of bizarre because stutterers don't stutter all the time. If they're reading, they won't stutter. If they're just talking to you, they stutter. But if they're singing, they don't stutter. If they're swearing, they don't stutter, which is fascinating.
Or if they're drinking, they don't stutter.
I don't know. I've never been in that situation. If they're speaking with a rhythmic swing of their arm or their leg, they do not stutter. So if they're singing, they will sing the song the way it's written because, well, I don't know, it has something to do with the structure of the brain. If they're imitating a regional or a foreign dialect, they don't stutter either. So what you will hear is sometimes if they learn this, they will start speaking in an interesting accent. Now, it works if they don't speak that accent all the time. But if they're speaking like I'm speaking right now, and then they go back to their office and talk and stutter, then they're okay. But if they try to talk in that dialect, it becomes part of their mindset and they start stuttering again. As fascinating as all that is. I don't know about the drunk part.
My cousin Jeffrey, he stutters.
Not Jeffrey.
He stutters all the time, constantly, and then his sister that's older than him, she stuttered as a younger lady, but or as a kid into her younger lady era, and once in a great while she'll kind of stutter. Then my cousin Jeffrey stutters. Then we have a lot of kind of speech disability in our family.
Huh.
And even with my son, you know, he had to go through speech, what do you call it, speech therapy.
Sure.
And my brother's son, the same thing. So I'm wondering if that's like all connected. Yeah.
Probably is. Tell them to swear. If you can't You can't stutter and swear at the same time. It's really kind of fascinating. Swearing. I know, swearing. Except my mother probably could. She was a professional swearer. She's like the best swearer in the whole county. Delayed auditory feedback is a technique in which stutter speech is played back through earphones with about 1/10 of a second delay. It's really fascinating watching this. The stuttering is almost completely suppressed if they hear what they're saying. Regulated breathing during speech. Subjects practice speaking during natural exhalation. Improvement was significant and sustained for all children outside the treatment setting. So regulated breathing works as well. The auditory feedback's really good, but it looks like they have a hearing problem because they'll have the thing, and they'll play it back like a 10th of a second later, isn't it?
Thinking about this and like what we were just talking about, would all this be very similar to the same thing that causes dyslexia? You know, how the brain can't recognize shapes or patterns? Would that be a reason why?
You know, it would be fascinating for somebody to do a study where they did a functional MRI on an individual and with both those problems and see if it lights up in the same area. I don't know.
Yeah, because, I don't know, to me, I'm just thinking that because of the delayed auditory feedback, I mean, that's a pattern there that the brain is recognizing.
Right.
That's a distorted pattern of anything that they're getting at.
So it's passing through Wernicke's area.
Yeah, the same place the dyslexia is.
Exactly.
So would that be the same place stuttering and speech?
Nobody's done the research that I've seen.
Huh.
But like I said, it would be fascinating to see it though.
Research number 2.
There you go. All you have to do is find a functional MRI machine. Yeah, they're only
Yeah.
$500,000, $600,000.
Yeah. Oh,
Nope.
that's cheap.
Yeah,
You can get one.
Yeah, we'll set one up. Yeah, sure. Social communication disorder is new to the DSM-5. Basic practical social communication skills such as greetings, taking turns in conversation, asking for clarifications or matching speech styles to the context of the listener, such as playground versus classroom, are impaired. So these individuals, when they're in the classroom, they yell. When they're outside, they speak in their classroom voice. You'll hear first grade teachers say, use your classroom voice, not your outside voice. And of course, these kids had a little problem with that. Social communication disorder is not due to intellectual deficiency, autism spectrum disorder, or other mental disorders, but does occur more commonly in families that have histories of autism, communication disorders, or learning disorders. And this kind of tells us maybe this has something to do with that same gene that causes all of these other problems. So all of this stuff is maybe tied together. We don't know.
Or it could be tied to dyslexia.
Yet, until Stephanie does her research. In the DSM-5, 4 of the DSM-4's pervasive developmental disorders were combined into a single spectrum disorder, autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, childhood disintegrated disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, are now combined as autism spectrum disorder. As much fun as that is. It made some people happy and it made some people really pissed off. And the ones that were really pissed off were the parents of kids with Asperger's syndrome, because they didn't want to be identified with such a disintegrated disease as autistic disorder. So they're really upset. And there's a lot of Asperger's kids without Asperger's syndrome, or what used to be Asperger's syndrome out there. And now, of course, instead of saying Asperger's syndrome, it says autistic spectrum disorder with a select number behind it.
So is there a lot of people that aren't diagnosed with the Asperger's syndrome?
Yeah, probably half the faculty. Oh, I said that on camera.
You admit in some test groups.
Doctors, you see a lot of doctors with Asperger's syndrome. Yeah, one of the fascinating things about medical doctors is that one of the reasons they're doctors is because they can concentrate on one thing. Yeah, and so when they're in a room, like surgeons will be, if there's something else going on, the surgeon is just concentrating on that one thing. I had a friend with Asperger's syndrome, and he lived over at the Delt House, and they would have parties all the time, and he would just sit there on the couch and read while everybody was, you know, there's drunk, naked women running around and whatnot, and he's just not paying any attention to what all this the drinking and partying and whatnot. He's just reading his book. Now, I don't have the ability to do that. If somebody's drunk and naked and running around, I see them. But half the time he didn't, you know, he didn't see them because he has Asperger syndrome. He had that capability of concentrating on one thing, and you have to admire that in somebody because I get so easily distracted with like anything.
So after they concentrate on that one thing, and they're done studying it, do they have that ability to go ahead and go to the next, you know, whatever they need to concentrate on?
Yes, yeah, they do. They do, and they can talk to you.
So they're almost like normal people.
They are normal people. The only difference is their power of concentration is a little bit more acute than a normal person. I'm here and I know what's going on outside, and I can hear what's going on out there. But if I had Asperger's, well, one of the things about people with Asperger's is really kind of fascinating. He's a college professor. He's an English professor, and he's really pretty. And because he's really pretty, people pay a lot of attention to him, and they overlook some of his deficits. But he speaks in a monotone, and when he does his lectures, I mean, his face is right here. He never looks at his students because he would get distracted. So he just looks at his notes, and that's the way he lectures. So if you know anybody out there, any professors out there who speak in a monotone, and it's hard to get their attention. You can't ask questions in class, and sometimes they won't let you ask questions in class. Everybody's smiling because you all know somebody who has this problem. Okay, it's probably Asperger syndrome to some degree. Now, Asperger syndrome can be relatively serious, not to the point that it bleeds into autistic disorder, the old autistic disorder. But you know, some of these people are relatively functional, but they have this power of concentration. I would swear that half of the faculty at Ashford had Asperger syndrome. Getting in a meeting with those guys just drove me crazy. Mm-hmm. Half of them are also OCD, and everything has to be arranged correctly, you know. Just drive me nuts. Now me, I'm the opposite of whatever that is. I'm a big slob, okay, Francis? I know you didn't want to say it. Autism spectrum disorder. When they changed the name, I wanted it to be autistic spectrum disorder. Autistic is an adjective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And spectrum disorder is a noun. So we need an adjective, not another noun. We need an adjective, okay? It should have been autistic spectrum disorder. Anyway, autism spectrum disorder involves problems in social interactions, communication, or play. There is a little social reciprocal interaction as far as that goes. In autism spectrum disorder, language is usually delayed or absent. As I said before, it used to be 70% of the individuals suffering from autism spectrum disorder, well, autism, never learned to speak. But now it's closer, somewhere between 15 and 30% aren't learning to speak. And it really all depends on how severe the case is. When it is present, it often seems abnormal in pitch, tone, or rhythm. So they don't, it sounds like, it's very similar to an individual with a hearing impairment, where they can't quite hear right, so they're not hearing tones correctly. That's their problem, but somebody with autism spectrum disorder, that's not their problem. It's not the fact they don't hear, it's the fact they're not listening and processing, of course. There are a narrow range of interests and activities. Stereotypic movements are often present. And of course, there are different degrees of severity as far as autism is concerned. The more severe cases are the individuals that never learn to speak. They just, somebody was just, the Women's Hall of Fame, there's a Women's Hall of Fame someplace. And what is her name? Granville, is that her name?
Brandon.
Brandon, yeah.
Temple Brandon.
Temple Brandon, thank you,
Yeah.
Temple Brandon. Can't think of names these days, okay. Yeah, she was just inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame.
What if they
She's a lady
can't
with
walk?
autism.
What if they can't walk? Is that, what do you call that?
Well, that's probably something else. But if somebody who has autism has a problem, sometimes they'll walk just on their toes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll flap their hands.
Yeah.
We don't see that nearly as much as we used to. Before we were trying to do something with these individuals. In the old days, they just let them go. And so you would go to someplace where they house these individuals, and people would be up on their toes, flapping their hands. But now, of course, we're teaching. Well, it's actually a form of training, but we're teaching these individuals.
Therapy.
Yeah, we're using therapy, but it's usually behavior modification of sorts. You have to make them you have to make them pay attention to you, and it's not always the easiest thing in the world. There are movies with people in it. What was that movie with Bruce Willis was some kind of a policeman, and they were trying to murder the little kid with autism.
Because he had figured out a code and
Right.
passwords.
Right, and there were only select individuals that he would interact with, his mother, his father, anybody else that tried to interact with him. But for some reason, he interacted with Bruce Willis. I'm not exactly sure why that happened. But anyway, he couldn't speak. He had flip cards that he used. And of course, making him concentrate, making him understand what was going on was very difficult. So he'd walk down the middle of the street and whatnot, and almost get hit by cars because he was in a different world. Okay. Anyway. The severity of autism spectrum disorder is specified by the degree of deficits shown, indicated by requiring support, difficulty initiating social interactions, requiring substantial support marked by deficits, even with supports in place, frequent and obvious repetitive behaviors, requiring very substantial support, minimal response to social overtures, repetitive behaviors, markedly interfering with functioning. As this gets more and more severe, these are more and more rare. The vast majority of individuals suffering from autism spectrum disorder, what we used to call autism, requiring support, much higher than used to be. Why? Because we're doing a much better job of training of teaching these individuals. And of course, as I said, it's behavior modification, so it does seem like training when you're doing it. One of the sad things, well, it's not really that sad, but one of the things you have to make them pay attention to you, and that's always a bit of a trick. I was going to say force, but you really can't force them to pay attention to you if they don't want to. They have only a select number of people that they will interact with. They tend to have only a select number of people that they will interact with. But of course, the less severe the cases, the more likely that they will be able to interact with people. I guess I could say that. Okay. Infants may show an indifference or aversion to physical contact and a failure to respond to the voices and social invitations of parents. And of course, this is the first time that you notice that the child may have a problem. Most also have some degree of intellectual disability, but the level of cognitive skills is uneven across abilities. In most cases, they have normal intelligence. The problem is getting them to show the normal intelligence. And once upon a time, of course, they just threw all these individuals into a big pile because they couldn't test them to find out what their IQ is. But now, of course, with more concentrated training, we're doing much better jobs at determining their intellectual deficiencies, if there are any intellectual deficiencies. Some of these individuals actually are at genius level. If you think about it, these individuals can concentrate on things. I was telling you about my friend that could read during a party, and you can imagine that he has been very successful because he has that capability of focusing. When I go home tonight, I'll be lucky if I can finish writing all my tests because I'll turn on the television and I'll start washing the dishes and I have to fix my food. I get distracted very easily, okay? And you know, writing a test isn't my favorite thing of all times. Okay, it is my favorite thing. You know the hard thing about writing a test? It's not finding the right answer, it's finding wrong answers that don't confuse people. That's the hard part. Anyway, that's why my tests are so hard, or so easy, I guess. About 1/4 of people with Fragile X meet the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder. But the question is it the Fragile X, or do they actually have autism, what we used to refer to as autism? That's the question. They have the same symptoms. Are these just symptoms that we're talking about? I mean, that's the question. It's like schizophrenia. Where is it? Is it one thing, or is it like lots of different things, and these are just symptoms? So that's really the question with Fragile X. Its presence is associated with lower development and generally poorer outcome. The individuals who also not only have an intellectual deficit, but also show an inability to concentrate, to focus. In the DSM-5 field trials, pooled reliability of autism spectrum disorder was very good at 0.69. So that tells us that this is one of those disorders that we've pinned down fairly well. Autism spectrum disorder is at least 4 times more common in males, although females are more likely to show intellectual disability. The problem with talking about autism spectrum disorder is, are we talking about autism, or are we talking about autism spectrum disorder? The reality is that most of what we're talking about is autism. We're not talking about Asperger's. Those individuals don't have nearly the deficit that individuals suffering from autism. Prevalence rates have increased from 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 500 in the past 20 years. And that's probably because we are doing a much better job of diagnosing than we did in the past. The DSM-5 estimates the disorder frequency at nearly 1% of the population. Some may have a particularly strong ability in very narrow areas, and this, of course, is known as Savant Syndrome. These individuals have a genius in one area or another. Sometimes it's mathematics, like it was with Rain Man in the movie. Sometimes it's music. Sometimes it's just anything that you can concentrate on. Music, drawing, mathematics, calculation of dates, mechanical aptitude, or memory. One of the smartest people in the world is an individual who has autism. And I'm trying to think of where he's from.
The little 12, 13-year-old boy?
No, he's in his 50s. He's the guy that they actually patterned Rain Man after.
Oh.
And this guy knows, you can ask him what day was April 3rd, 1726, and he just gives you the answer like that. It's really kind of amazing. Wherever he lives, he goes to the library every day and reads. And of course, he has the ability to focus, so he does a really fabulous job. The man's brilliant. He knows, he's like a computer, but of course he doesn't have any interacting skills. He doesn't have the ability to interact with people. You can talk to him, but of course he doesn't initiate eye contact.
So he was born with no social interaction skills?
Right. He started reading at a relatively young age, and he just started accumulating information, and he has something of an eidetic memory, which is really kind of exciting. This is an individual suffering from autism who has the ability to draw. As you can see, she's really very good at drawing, but look at this guy's face. Look at this guy's hands. Yeah, they're just stubs. And look at his feet. I mean, she's okay with legs. She's okay. Well, yeah, those are hooves. The horse's face is wonderful. The man's body is okay, but his face looks like a cartoon. Same thing with the chickens. The chickens, pretty good job of drawing the chickens, but look at the feet. Now, why would that be? Why? What's going on with faces and feet and hands? Why can she draw the rest of the stuff, but she can't draw faces, hands, and feet?
They were born without something, right?
She's got all the parts.
No, I mean like,
Oh, you mean these-
I bet there's like something missing that they were born without in their brain, you know, that we haven't.
Horse has a
able-
face, man doesn't have a face.
But like with them, maybe they don't see themselves or they, you know, as reality. I don't know. It's weird.
Now, why would I be able to draw your face, but she can't?
Because you're able to look at her face.
I'm sorry?
Because you're able to look at her face.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can't.
Exactly.
They don't look.
Yeah. See, she doesn't look at faces. She also doesn't look at hands and feet.
That's how my son is.
Yeah.
With my son, he does that. For a long time, he would draw everything perfectly, even, you know, a human body,
Right.
except for when it comes to the face and hands. You know, until we started showing him superheroes.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
individuals with different abilities that normal people don't have.
So if he drew my picture, I'd look like Superman?
You look like Superman, yeah. You'd be wearing a cape and tights and everything.
All right.
But that's how we got him to
Right.
start looking at people's faces.
Okay.
So now when he looks up and sees people with glasses, he'll be like, oh, like Superman, like Clark Kent, you know. So starts to make associations.
I need to put on my glasses so he recognizes me
And
as
one
Clark
thing I
Kent.
wanted to know,
Yes.
that's the difference between autistic and autistic spectrum disorder. With the obsession that kids with the autistic spectrum disorder, they have the obsession there, that's their focus, their
Right.
ability to concentrate
Right.
and do something with it. Now, when it's just autism, do they still have the same obsessive
Right.
capability
Yes.
and further pursue it as well?
Right.
Okay.
And that's one of the things. Well, if you've
Well,
seen
the
the
spectrum
movie.
is just more comorbidity with anything else, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas opposed to it's just one singular thing, the other one's
Right.
one plus others.
But of course, now if you have Asperger syndrome,
Kind of sort of have
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Be on the
they talked
spectrum
about
as
you
well.
being way over here on the continuum.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas that was a diagnosis, we use that diagnosis a lot, Asperger syndrome, a lot.
I know
We
for
don't so much anymore because parents get upset.
For the longest time, they didn't, because that's one thing that they told me when I first started taking my
Right.
son in was, you know, how are you to these words, you know, because some
Right.
people get upset when we tell them their kids are like this or like that. And I'm like, dude, if it helps the dude, the little guy, then it helps the
Exactly.
little guy.
Sure.
But,
Some people are embarrassed by it. And of course, they don't need to be because this is just a condition.
Yeah, but I know in the Navajo Nation, that's a big thing. Some people do want the title, and some don't.
Right.
And it just depends on, I guess, how educated they are in the area
Right.
of what they're facing.
Yes, it's unfortunate. Autism spectrum disorder tends to run in families. About 5% of siblings of autistic persons also show the condition. Twin studies support a substantial genetic contribution. There have been positive linkage reports for every chromosome. At least 188 candidate sites are being investigated. DSM-5 reports that about 50% of the cases are known to be associated with specific genetic mutations, with the remaining risk polygenetic and diffuse. So that means that 85% of the time we don't see this genetic mutation. So we can't say it's a genetic mutation. It's like schizophrenia. It's just an outcome, and it's being caused by a lot of different things. And that may be one of the reasons why we never discover where this is on any chromosome. We've got 188 possibilities at this point, and we will continue to look at it to see if we can figure it out. The idea, of course, is once we identify it, then possibly we can change the genetic structure of a baby in vitro and in utero. In utero, and maybe we can take care of some of this, where individuals don't have autism anymore. We are able to defeat this condition. Autism spectrum disorder shows higher serotonin levels than unaffected persons. Brain growth for infants have been reported to be accelerated in the first 2 years, followed by a slower than normal growth period so that the brain size is in the normal range by early adolescence. Abnormalities of the cerebellum, the amygdala, and the amygdala have also been reported in autism spectrum disorder. And I'm not exactly sure if that makes any sense. And that may be one of the reasons why we see them having tantrums, going into tantrums, because of the excessive, the size of the amygdala. No consistent and unique abnormality is present. It is not possible to diagnose a disorder by means of any anatomical or biochemical marker. And that's what we're looking for. We're trying to figure out, is there anything in there? Is there any substance in the body? Is there any chemical in the body that we can identify so that we can identify these individuals and we can say definitively this individual has autism? And there isn't. There's not a structure in the brain, there's not a structure in the body, there's just nothing that we can find that we can do that. Once upon a time I was working in the hospital and we had a baby that was born and their hairline grew right down to their eyebrows. It was a little odd. Their hairline grew down to their eyebrows. Well, that's a genetic marker, that's a biomarker for dwarfism. So we had to do a genetic study on the individual, and it turned out, yes, that individual was suffering from dwarfism, which is a mutation, a genetic mutation that causes short stature. And we identified it by this biomarker. Of course, that's what we're looking for with anybody. We're looking for something that definitively tells us that there is a problem. Dwarfism, of course, is a mutation that is always obvious, but it's obvious later on in life. But we have noticed that this is the case, that their hairline grows down to their eyebrows. What have we done now? Brain growth for infants has been reported to be accelerated. What have we talked about? Okay, so we're looking for biomarkers. We're always looking for biomarkers. Several studies have examined the possibility that the increase in the disorder over the past 25 years should be due to the increased use of medical vaccinations, such as the measles, mumps, and rubella, the MMR vaccine. Some people will start displaying symptoms after they get this inoculation. To date, studies have not found any evidence that vaccinations or mercury exposure is associated with autism spectrum disorder. And of course, there are individuals out there that refuse to have their children inoculated for one thing or another because they're afraid their child will come down with something. But there is no proof that that happens. Stimulant medications and newer antipsychotic drugs such as risperidone have been used, especially those with hyperactive symptoms, self-injury, and aggression. And usually what we're trying to do is control some behavior. And normally it's self-injury is the behavior that we're trying to control. That's usually with the other, not the aggression, the hyperactivity symptoms, we can usually control that with behavior modification. But self-injury is a tough one. Is a real tough one, and so is aggression. SSRIs have been prescribed to reduce repetitive or compulsive-like behaviors. The stimulant methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, reduces symptoms of hyperactivity among autistic subjects. There is no consensus on the relative effectiveness and safety of these approaches. So here we are, we're medicating them, and all we're trying to do is control some of their behavior. And so we need to think about that. Is this correct or is this incorrect? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But in order to control their behavior, we have to pay a lot of attention to it. And there's not always somebody that wants to do that. Yeah, mother, father, aunt, uncle, grandmother, whoever. Variety of treatments for autism spectrum disorder have been promoted. Vitamins and minerals, special sugar-free or gluten-free diets, chelation therapy to remove the heavy metals from the body, chelation, I mispronounced that, auditory integration therapy, craniosacral manipulation, secretin, sensory integration, facilitated communication, and holding therapy. All of these have been tried, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. We have been able to identify select individuals who have a food allergy, and that is causing their problem. So we take that whatever it is, and sometimes it's odd things like red dye number 26 or whatever. Sometimes we can start feeding them in a different manner, and it actually makes some of their symptoms go away. Doesn't make all their symptoms go away, but it'll make some of their symptoms go away. There's a paucity of research without substantial empirical support for any of these interventions, of course, and they're just ideas that people have. So they will try them out on select individuals. And of course, if they find somebody that it actually works on, then they start screaming that it's going to work for everybody, it's going to work for everybody. I've discovered red dye 26 is the culprit. And we're poisoning our children with all this. So somebody gets to make a lot of money. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has prominent symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, or a combination of both. At least some symptoms must have caused impairment before age 12. They must be present in at least 2 different settings, and they must interfere with academic, occupational, or social functioning. In other words, if they're just acting up out at home, it's probably mom and or dad or whoever's there. So you're not going to get the medication. You don't get the medication. You don't get the Ritalin to quiet this kid down. It has to be academic, occupational, or social as well. ADHD is and usually it's at home is number 1, and then number 2 is usually academic. They're acting up in school, and they can't control them. ADHD is the leading cause of referrals for youth to mental health care. Some places, some schools, 50% of the children are taking Ritalin. You think I'm kidding? Yeah. So the secretary has to give out the Ritalin at the middle of the day, which is always fun. Here, take this pill. Oh, you're coming for your pills. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is much more commonly diagnosed in males than females, approximately at a ratio of about 2 to 1. Most often, ADHD becomes apparent when a child enters school and is required to remain in a seat for periods of time. Whereas, when they were 6 years old or 5 years old or whatever, they were able to just run around, burn this off. Of course, now they can't. Prevalence of ADHD is estimated at about 5% of school-aged children. But as I said, some schools have as high as 50%, as odd as that seems.
Is it because people are pushing it to make kids focus in their class?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They're always jumping, running around.
It also has to do with parents that don't want to pay it that much attention to it.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch your television shows. Or video games.
Or they just don't have that, what do you call that attention span to sit there and watch their child, play.
Maybe
or
they have the
whatever.
same problem the child has.
Exactly, like my grandma and them, they used to think I had ADHD and my cousin because it's like always, and they'd
Sure.
be giving us cold coffee saying, they said that was the cure for.
Did it work?
I don't know, my grandma would pull my hair really tight.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did that work?
The
I'll
whole thing
remember
therapy
that.
works.
I'll remember that the next time you act up in class. I'll have to send Kristen over to pull your hair. Just grab it real hard.
Do it.
As children mature, the condition usually becomes less obvious and often attenuates significantly by late adolescence. They usually grow out of it. As soon as they go through puberty, they get better because those areas of their brain have been pruned away. Family and twin studies indicate a strong genetic component to ADHD, although strong family, school, and peer influences are also important in its occurrence. In other words, it has to do with the school, it has to do with the social structure, with the family structure. Some families don't pay attention to kids until they act up. And if that is the case, then they're conditioning their children to have ADHD. Just about anything you can think of, any problem that you can think of, one of the symptoms looks like ADHD. So we keep misdiagnosing this. They've got a problem, they've got a family problem at home, and here we are, we're throwing Ritalin at these kids, and they really don't have a problem. The problem is mom and dad. Oh, it's sad.
That's what I was gonna say on the reservation. Well, I don't know if it's true everywhere else, but I noticed here on the Navajo reservation, the school is the one that recommends
Right.
and writes the
Sure.
referrals for the medicine first instead of it being noticed the household.
Right.
The household is like the last place it's ever noticed a problem.
In the white community, it's usually mom and dad. And they will go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, are they having any problems in school? Then they'll go to the school, and they'll get the school to say, yes, he's having problems in school. In other words, they're getting,
And I think that's a cultural thing too, that's the difference between like Native Americans and like non-natives. Like a lot of Native Americans, when we talk about like the ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, that those are all just natural human abilities
Right.
that's left over, is how we are taught what that is.
no, it's not,
That's
that's
what,
cool.
that's what I was gonna say, because we're not limited to resources. We can go outside, we tell our kids to go outside and
Right.
play. There's a lot of imaginary play that
Mhm.
happens too, so.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
So if anything, it's more like they're natured and nurtured to explore their minds to the fullest potential, while they still can at a young age before adolescence, because after adolescence, they're going to have more communal responsibilities, family responsibilities.
So it's logical that it would be the school. If there was a problem, it would be the school. It would be the first. It's logical. In families where there's drugs or alcohol, this can be a problem as well because they're not paying enough attention to the children. And the children, in order to get their parents to pay attention to them, have to act out. So that's a problem. That can be a potential problem as well.
I think a lot of the children that are in the homes with alcohol and violence that do have disability are the ones that are ignored,
Right.
as opposed to the ones that are causing trouble and getting all the attention. So
They're the
that's where
smart ones that have
whole
figured out this is how I get mom to pay attention.
Yeah, and
to
they
their
get the
dad.
whole misdiagnosed in there.
Right.
So the kid that doesn't need it gets it, and the one that does doesn't.
So there's a lot of misdiagnosis.
Yeah.
DSM-5 reports that low birth weight may be associated with a threefold increase in risk. The specific cause or causes of ADHD remain unidentified. And the reason it remains unidentified is because there's a lot of different causes for ADHD. There's a lot of different reasons that we are diagnosing these individuals with ADHD. Lots of different ways. So we're trying to figure this out. We're trying to figure out how in the world we can make this kid stop running around the classroom. And of course, the main means is stimulant medication. Methylphenidate, which is Ritalin, has been shown to reduce the symptoms of ADHD in the short term and is effective for about 70% of children compared to about 10% for a placebo. So it really does work. It really does work. But it only works on children that actually have ADHD. If it's a social situation, then it's not going to work. Actually, they're going to get a rebound effect. In other words, they're going to get more active. And now they really do have, now they have
Yeah,
drug-induced
they really do.
ADHD.
Yeah.
Is there adults with ADHD?
Yeah.
I mean, like all adults?
Yeah, there are adults that have to take Ritalin. It's kind of tragic, I guess. While useful in the short term, the medications do not appear to have long-term effectiveness and may stunt growth, and that's, of course, the biggest problem with Ritalin. 3-year follow-up for the multimodal treatment study of children with ADHD found that although medication produced greater improvements than behavior therapy at the conclusion of treatment, there were no group differences between medication, behavior therapy, or a combination of those on any measure for 2 years later. Problem with behavior modification, behavior therapy, is that somebody's got to do it. And the person that's got to do it, it has to be the mom and dad at home, and then there has to be somebody at school that's willing to do it as well. It takes time. It takes somebody that cares. And of course, it's hard to find. It's easy to find moms and dads that care, but it's hard to find teachers that care. Yeah. I can say that. There is no evidence that treatment with stimulant medication is associated with a reduction in later risk of substance abuse. The American Psychological Association Task Force on Pharmacological, Psychosocial, and Combined Interventions for Childhood Disorders recommended that children should first receive a trial of psychosocial intervention for ADHD before medication is initiated. But does that ever happen? No, hell no. Did I say hell? I'm sorry. No, it doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because it costs too much money. And you have to find enough people that care. So who cares? Well, the American Psychological Association cared at one point. But it's not like they're going to send people to the reservation to help. That ain't going to happen. There's not enough money. Sorry. The incidence of ADHD has increased dramatically over the past 3 decades. This may partially stem from practices intended to improve diagnostic reliability through the use of standardized rating scales. And once they start using these standardized rating scales, if you've got a kid that doesn't pay attention, why, they get picked up on this as well. If you've got a kid that is looking for attention, they get picked up on these rating scales as well. So they're all being diagnosed with ADHD. Although ADHD is observed in other countries, American children are more likely to receive the diagnosis, which is true except for India. In India, they have a larger number of kids that are diagnosed with ADHD. Why? Because they do meditation. There's a lot of Hindus and Muslims in those 2 countries, and since they do meditation, and you've got a kid that won't sit down, they diagnose them with ADHD. So it's really kind of bizarre. What happens in church if you make noise?
They send you to the
You got spanked?
Agnes class.
I don't.
Oh, yeah, you get taken to the bathroom.
Is that right? Yeah, whack. But it's only going to last another 15 minutes. Come on. Have it.
It's like 2 hours.
80 to 90% of methylphenidate is prescribed for American children in spite of the lack of evidence of long-term effectiveness. One of the reasons is because we invented it, and we have pharmaceutical companies that need their profits, okay? So that's really important. Same way with Viagra and Prozac. We need our profits. The stimulant medications are not specific for ADHD, and drug response is not a validation of the diagnosis. Normal men and boys respond similarly to stimulant drugs as ADHD boys. ADHD rating scales, which focus only on symptom presence, results in many false positives, and that's what I was saying before. There are no laboratory tests, neurological assessments, physical features, or attentional assessment that are diagnostic for ADHD. There's no way to tell if they really happen. We can't draw your blood. We can't look at your ears. We can't we can't take a dipstick and stick it into your urine. It just doesn't work. There are many non-ADHD causes for hyperactive behavior in children, including sleep disturbances, side effects of asthma medication, hearing impairment, child abuse, inadequate parenting, and the onset of conditions of other conditions of difficulties. So there's a lot of different reasons that look like ADHD. All these things look like ADHD. This is a really serious problem. Disruptive Impulse-Control and conduct disorder involve behavior that tends to bring the person into conflict with authority, often shown as impulsive or poorly controlled violations of social rules, and that's disruptive impulse control and conduct disorders. Like the neurodevelopmental disorders, they are more common in males and females. Included in the section and double listed in the DSM-5 is antisocial personality disorder. But of course, we don't diagnose children with antisocial personality disorder. We diagnose them with conduct disorder, and we wait until they go to prison, and then we diagnose them with antisocial personality disorder. We know that they're psychopaths. We knew that when they started torturing babies, or they beat up their brother or something, their baby brother that was crawling on the floor. We knew that at that point, but we can't diagnose these guys until they go to prison. Then we can give them antisocial personality. Well, we don't give it to them, they had it to begin with. Distinguishing features of oppositional defiant disorder are recurrent disobedience and hostility toward authority figures. So if you've got some, and I'm hostile to, I hope Sarah hasn't told you how hostile I am to authority figures, because I am. Yeah, I know, I got this problem. So I don't know, do I have oppositional defiant disorder? No, that's
you have
something we
conduct
did.
disorder.
No. Just, I've had old man's disorder or something. Diagnostic criteria for oppositional defiant disorder includes often losing one's temper, blaming others for one's own mistakes, and I never. I always blame either Francis or Jeff. So, and being easily annoyed, actually I'm not very easily annoyed. So that's, I guess I don't have oppositional defiant disorder. All I am is oppositional.
You're just oppositional.
The diagnosis requires the weekly presence of 4 such symptoms for a period of at least 6 months. If the person is under 5 years of age, symptoms are required nearly every day to qualify for the diagnosis. So we only give it to kids in school, kindergarten, grade school. They have to be have an authority figure other than mom and dad. It's interesting, when you see these kids, if you talk to these kids, as old as you guys are, and you're not that old, but as old as you are, they won't pay any attention to you. You can tell them, don't do that, and they won't listen to you. That's oppositional defiant disorder.
Maybe if you say it like that, yeah, they won't listen to you.
If you swear at them so that you're not stuttering, right?
You don't swear still. They still
I
do.
swear all the time. I have to control myself. My
So,
mother-
Bruce, the children, the teenagers, mostly adolescents, that are getting reported for conduct disorders, how many of those children actually do get followed?
Well, we can't.
But can the school?
No. What happens
Okay,
is,
so-
as soon as they turn 18, now they're an
That's it.
adult. All of their
The
records
files
from
sealed.
before, they're all sealed. Everything is sealed. So can we follow them? The answer is yet. Not even a little
Not
bit.
yet.
Not yet. Never. No, we can't follow them. And in order to open up those files, it takes a court order in order to open the files. So no, we can't follow these kids. We don't know what's happening to them.
Okay, so what
Until
if-
we ask them
what if
after they get
What
arrested.
if someone that was representing someone that became an adult that was coming from this situation? What if those records were open and they did find that? And whose fault would it be there, that this person didn't get the care that they needed?
Oh, whose fault would it be? It wouldn't be anybody's fault.
Oh, yay!
That's the law, okay? It's
That's
the
what it's
law.
gonna, that's what it's gonna do.
It's the law. I had a friend that, well, he wasn't my friend, what am I talking about? He murdered somebody when he was 15. And it was a brutal murder. I mean, he stabbed this person like 45 times. And, as soon as he turned, when he turned 21, this is in the state of Indiana, when he turned 21, he got out of prison. He was gone.
I'm only asking.
And all that was sealed because he was
Yeah.
only 15 when it happened. You have to try them as an adult, and you'll read this in the newspaper from time to time. They're going to try this 17-year-old as an adult, or this 16-year-old as an adult.
So that way you don't have to worry
That
about
way,
any of
the records
before.
are open, exactly. Exactly. But
I'm
this guy,
just-
it was brutal, and he raped the lady
Uh-huh.
when he killed her.
I'm only asking this because I know the high school that I went to, this is was an everyday problem.
Oppositional defiant
No,
disorder?
not,
Or conduct
that's
disorder?
the least of it.
Yeah.
Conduct disorder,
Yeah.
that one, that's what I'm talking about. not
And that's why we
serious
can't
about that.
diagnose them with antisocial personality disorder until they go to prison. If they go to prison, yeah, like that's not going to happen. Okay. Sometimes they can duck it if they're pretty. They can duck it. The ugly guys, we all get caught. All us ugly guys get caught. You're safe, Jeff. So am I, buddy. The severity of oppositional defiant disorder can be specified as mild, moderate, or severe. Usually onset is before age 8, and it commonly precedes the development of conduct disorder. It's strongly comorbid with ADHD. So do they have both problems, or is it just a conduct problem? I know, Jeff, what are we going to diagnose you with?
Everything.
I know, this is the problem, you've got everything. Okay, I just want to thank everybody. I had a really great semester. Always have a good time. I had a good time no matter what. So, but you guys were a lot of fun. I had a good time in this class. This has been a great class. So thanks.
Yep.
I hope you had close to as good a time as I had. That's not possible.
We'll be back this summer, I'll let you know.
Oh, good.
I have a question.
I'm gonna miss you guys all this
We still
summer.
have 2 more years, 4 more years.
Oh, that's perfect. I can't wait. I'd leave if I didn't have somebody speaking to me with a Montana accent.
Oh, Bruce, did you ever fix that thing with Sarah for that summer class?
For your
They
health
said
and
your name was on the
psychology.
class.
I'm teaching that class and I'm teaching it online, so.
Okay, so
And I asked her about it and she said, no, it's okay, so
Oh, okay.
I don't, you know, I mean,
I think that's just like prerequisites that they have to put on there from the downstairs.
I'm gonna miss all you guys this summer, but if you're taking my online class, well, we can at least complete that. I will be back in the fall.
I'll
They
be
made
back
the
in
mistake.
fall.
They made the mistake of hiring me, allowing me to sign my contract. So, as soon as I got it, I signed it really fast. Sarah came in about 15 minutes later and said, have you gotten your contract yet? And it was already down there, and Monty had already signed it. So I'm good to go. I'm good to go.
I'm graduating, but I'll be back in the fall.
You better be back in the
Well,
fall.
I'm still taking my bachelor's.
Perfect. And we will talk more about forensic psychology,
Oh, God, yes.
So
I
you're
cannot wait for
teaching health psychology this summer, right?
health psychology.
Some, session A or session B?
It's, starts with, it's a 10-week bonus.
Oh, okay.
So I guess it's both. Oh, you're gonna pretend that you were here, huh? Okay. I
You
like
was
your
here.
phone, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah, I might steal that if you ever put it down, so I keep it on for you. Dangerous, just leave it.
Oh,
there.
no, I have the funeral to go to. I have to go look after the funeral. No.
No final
Yeah,
review,
because I'm
just the
basically,
quizzes
so I
and
can't, try.
and whatever discussions I had. I think I only had discussions through schizophrenia.
Oh,
I can't
yeah, I'm
remember
sorry
what I
about
said.
your-
So when's the last day you can submit our 5-page?
13th.
13th? Safe?
Yeah, 13th is Saturday, so that'll give you Sunday to read
Okay.
darn thing. 13th.
Oh, no.
Just put it off to.
So it just kind of, everything just kind of collapsed on her all at once.
Okay, just put it off to the end, Francis.
How long was he under?
I mean, that's an order, Francis.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
You're welcome.
really greedy.
Like I can order anybody to do anything.
Oh.
You know what, I'm gonna wanna read this book tonight.
That's
Kafka on
kinda
the Shore,
selfish, but I
it's
guess
a Japanese,
It does happen.
it's a Japanese novel.
She wants
But I find
it,
the
but she
Japanese
can't
just-
get it. She wants it hiding.
They're so strange.
I read the book for my 5-page essay. Because it's real literature. So I read the Gita.
Oh, Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah.
Okay,
So.
I've got a copy of it downstairs if you need it.
Well, I had actually read 2 books.
Okay.
I
So this is
read-
Hindu, you're gonna be
Yeah.
talking about Hindu,
So I
really?
read. Oh wait, this is not the right book.
That's pornography.
Yeah. That Guided by the Mountains political science book.
Oh,
Now political philosophy.
is there a Navajo political philosophy?
No.
Don't get arrested?
There's actually this guy, he quotes Avery Kenny, but Mike Lerma, he used to work with the National Policy Institute.
Oh, okay.
He used to be one of the researchers that worked there, and I guess he used to work with the National Policy and he was a researcher there, and he ended up leaving the National Policy and he started writing books. But as I'm reading the books, like a lot of it's based off the National Policy's research. So this guy pretty much just branched out and used
So he's stealing all these ideas. It's kind of cool.
basically, yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I read 2 books on the Gita, and because I know you want us to talk about what we read in the literature, and then also compare it to Tanakh culture.
Right.
So, all right, so the book I'm reading talks a lot about